Good morning, everybody. How do we do church? Specifically, how do we do church as Unitarian Universalists? So, there's a lot of us here, various backgrounds. Some of us grew up or are growing up in the middle of it. Some of us grew up in other traditions. Some of us grew up with no religious background whatsoever. And I'm going to make a sweeping generalization and say that probably most of us come to First Unitarian not entirely sure how to do church here. And that's okay. So after my Roman Catholic upbringing, I became a Unitarian Universalist at a small UU church in a neighborhood in Boston. First church in Jamaica Plain, lovely place. We were about 120 folks, with about 70 folks showing up on a good Sunday. And it was the warmth of the congregation that brought me in, and it was the theology that kept me. And I want to tell you a sad story, though. There was a family with young children in the congregation, and the mom got breast cancer. And it was in that moment that I learned what a congregation can be. People showed up for this family in a deep way. There was many a casserole, for sure, but also childcare and rides and emotional support and even scrubbing toilets when that was called for. Unfortunately, she succumbed to that cancer. And I remember at her memorial service, her husband got up in front of us and, weeping, thanked the congregation. And he said, "Truly, you are God's people, and your hands are God's hands." You are God's people, and your hands are God's hands. So let me just stop there and encourage folks to hear that statement through the lens of the theology that works for them in earnest. But I wonder, as we ask ourselves this question of how to do church, I wonder if the question we're really asking is, how are we the hands of God here, or the hands of love, the hands of the holy, or the Spirit, or the hands of the good? How are we the hands? Reverend Angela and I were talking the other day about what it means to do church, and she broke out a phrase that I really love. She said that when we are members of a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we're asked to be the church, to be the church. And her point is that we don't just show up and watch a few sermons and maybe volunteer a little at the church. She says we can't volunteer at our church any more than we can babysit our own children. When it's our church, we don't attend the church, we co-create the church. We co-create the church together. So at this point, I'm going to invite you to co-create a piece of art. Now, no doubt you saw those chalices on the wall that we used painter's tape to mark out, and they're underneath the sound booth there. Today, at each service, we're going to make up a chalice of our own ideas about how to do church. So I'd like everyone to look in your order of service and take out the blue sticky note from the order of service. And if you don't have a blue sticky note or something to write with, please put up your hand and someone will bring it to you. Everybody got a blue sticky note and the pencil? All right. Our crack team is springing into action there. And right now, I invite you to think a little bit about how you currently engage in the life of this congregation, or if you're not really engaged in the life of this congregation, how you'd like to engage in the life of the congregation in the future. How do you want to be? How do you want to do that? And just write down one thing. Don't make a list. Just one thing is fine. And think about it first. How are you the hands of love in this congregation? How are you co-creating this church? So when you're done, pass the notes down to the end of the aisle, and any children and youth who are here will gather them up and take them all to the back, and we're going to fill in the chalice on the left. Okay, so you got a few minutes to use this, to do this. Think about it, take your time. There's going to be some great music. All right, so any children who aren't otherwise already doing so, you're invited to come back and help stick the stickies onto the chalice. Looks like we got a crew on there. Blue goes in the base, though. So thanks for that. I want to talk a little more about doing church. Engaging in the life of a congregation, being the church, is certainly part of being a Unitarian Universalist. But there's another important element, and that is fostering one's personal spirituality. So before I was in seminary, I was a very active lay leader who was the chair of the board of trustees at one point and led the pledge campaign and started programs, and who suffered in many other ways. And it's not suffering here, actually. The way people do it here is lovely. But church for me became a to-do list. And I realized I was burnt out when I would come into church and hide in the back and not want to talk to anyone. And that's because I was focused on being the church and not nourishing myself spiritually. Now, all that work for the church is essential, but in addition to being the church, we Unitarian Universalists affirm the encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregations. We affirm the encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregations. And if that sounds familiar, that's good, because that's our third principle. And because we are Unitarian Universalists and we celebrate theological diversity, the nature of our spiritual practices is going to vary a lot. We're going to do a lot of different things. So a quick look at our church calendar for just next week includes mindfulness meditation, Wu Tai Chi, a rehearsal of the Soul Singers, pranic healing, conversational Spanish, Karuna Buddhist study, the food pantry is running, there's after-school tutoring, the UU People of Color Caucus is convening, there's a chronic illness healing circle, folk dancing, potluck theology, and yoga. And I'm probably missing some too, and I apologize for that. But that is just 1 week. Is that not amazing? That's amazing. This congregation, I'll tell you. And I believe that those are all variations on spiritual practices that are happening right here. And hopefully our shared act of Sunday worship services serves as a point of focus for our spiritual lives, however varied they may be outside of that. And of course, our spiritual practices don't have to happen here on this campus. To be honest, my single most prayerful time of the week is the time when I'm walking alone in the Sandias. That's my most spiritually fed moment. And I find a lot of beauty and depth in spiritual practices that take place in our homes. So maybe silent meditation in the morning, maybe saying a word of thanks before a meal. I think there is such grace in those simple acts. So my point is to take our spiritual lives as seriously as we take our work lives, or our friend and family lives, or our community lives. So I'm inviting you now to reflect on your spiritual practices, something you do or something you'd like to do, and write it on the orange sticky note. So turn to the orange sticky note, and if you don't have an orange sticky note, put your hand up, and someone will bring you one, and then pass it to the aisle. The children will come pick it up, and we'll bring them to the back of the sanctuary. So take a moment for that. I want to thank you all for being open to this experiment in worship. Intergen is a place for intergenerational services are places for experimentation and movement and taking some chances, making art. We're going to take pictures of these chalices that we're co-creating, and we'll share them this week over our social media channels. But I want to reflect a little. Doing church involves being the church and fostering our spirituality. Do we need to choose? Nope. In fact, we shouldn't choose. I think we either do both things well or neither well. And by that I mean we can bring our personal spirituality to the work of the church. Every committee meeting is an opportunity for deep listening and radical hospitality. Every act of service is an opportunity to practice being present. I think this is particularly true when we do our justice work, where we're bringing what's in the deepest notions within our heart out into the world. You know, the idea that this is what love looks like in public. That's our justice work. In this way, we are both the creators of a spiritual banquet, and we are the ones being fed. So it's possible to take from this sermon that I'm asking a lot of things from folks, but really this is about also people coming here and being fed. It's one of the amazing things about a congregation that we don't think about when we show up, that if we stick around a little bit, amazing things will happen to us, like that family I talked about. Now, all of this is intensely personal. What feeds us each is very different. And our ability to engage in the life of the congregation or foster our personal spirituality, that varies a lot with our personal life circumstances. So family and job obligations, limitations on our health or our time, it can make it hard to do these things. That's when it's good to be reminded that, almost unlike any other place in society, being a Unitarian Universalist is a long, slow ride with no point of arrival. You never get there. We're just on the road. So people often share with me that they used to come to church a lot, but now their newborn or elder care situation has kept them from participating for a little while. And I'm always fond of saying, these things have their seasons. These things have their seasons. You know, in churches, we think about time in intergenerational time, really. You know, there are multiple generations sitting in this room right now. And so these things have their seasons, and seasons come and seasons go. No one shames summer for giving way to fall. So it goes, and so it goes with life in a church. So my prayer for us as a spiritual community is that in all seasons, we'll find ways to be the church and foster our spirituality in ways that suit our circumstances. And that in all these things, we find consolation and community and inspiration and guidance. May it be so, and blessed be.